The bullet hit Malcolm Carter before he even finished his sentence. No warning, no command, no chance to explain. Just a flash, a sound, and blood on the clean pavement of Lincoln Park. His twin brother, Isaiah, watched the life drain from Malcolm's eyes under the blue glow of police lights. And in that frozen moment, one truth seared into his mind. Justice in America had just failed another black man. Before we begin this story, tell us where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you believe no one should die for simply existing while black. Isaiah and Malcolm had survived war zones, not traffic stops. They'd fought side by side in Delta Force missions across deserts and mountains, outsmarting death more times than they could count. But on that quiet Chicago night, death found them at home. They were on their way to see their sister Ava, a small family dinner, a rare moment of peace after years apart. Malcolm had even joked, "Man, maybe we're finally living like normal people." Isaiah smiled, unaware that normal would end in minutes. The flashing lights appeared behind them near Lincoln Park, a neighborhood that rarely saw men like them driving new cars after dark. Isaiah pulled over immediately, calm, hands visible on the wheel, habits drilled into him since childhood. Their father had taught them. When the cops stop you, son, move slow, stay polite, and pray they don't see fear as hate threat. Tonight, prayer wasn't enough. Two officers stepped out, Daniel Briggs and Thomas Reynolds. Briggs was tall, confident in the kind of way that comes from knowing power would protect him. Reynolds followed behind, uncertain but obedient. Briggs tapped the window with his flashlight, his tone already sharp. License and registration. Isaiah handed them over quietly. Briggs scanned the papers, smirking. "You from South Side? You lost or something?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "We're visiting family." "Officer?" Briggs tilted his head. "Family? In this neighborhood?" His flashlight stayed too long on their faces. Isaiah tried to defuse it. "We're not looking for trouble." "Sir?" But Malcolm, always the voice that refused to bend, shot back. "You stopped the wrong men tonight." Briggs's grin faded. "Step out of the car." The cold air hit them as they stepped onto the street. A white couple across the road peeked through their curtains, then disappeared into silence. Isaiah raised his hands. "You said this was a traffic stop. What's the problem?" Briggs circled them like a predator. "You fit the description," he said. "Of what?" Malcolm asked. "A car theft." Reynolds shifted uneasily. "Dan, maybe." "Shut up." Briggs cut him off. "Let me handle it." Isaiah's training told him to stay calm. Read the man. Watch his hands. But Briggs wasn't reading them. He was hunting them. He shoved Malcolm in the chest. "Back up!" Malcolm staggered, raising his hands higher. "We didn't do anything!" he shouted. Briggs's eyes narrowed. "You resisting?" Isaiah stepped forward. "No one's resisting!" Then came the movement. Sudden, meaningless, irreversible. Briggs's finger tightened. The gun roared once. Malcolm gasped, a red stain blooming across his chest. Isaiah caught him before he fell, screaming, "No! Malcolm, stay with me!" The world narrowed to sound. Briggs yelling, Reynolds panicking, Isaiah's heartbeat thundering in his ears. "Call an ambulance!" he shouted. Briggs didn't move. He pointed his gun at Isaiah. "On the ground!" Isaiah froze. He saw his brother's blood on his hands and the same look their father once had. Disbelief. Pain. Betrayal. Malcolm struggled to speak, his lips trembling. "Don't. Let them get away." Then silence. His eyes stayed open, glassy and still. Briggs exhaled slowly. Stepping back, he reached for something. He said flatly. Reynolds stared at the empty pavement. He didn't reach. He whispered, voice shaking. Briggs glared, then say he did. Write it that way. Within minutes. It was official. Another suspect neutralized during a tense confrontation. Isaiah was thrown to the ground, cuffed, and dragged into the squad car. He didn't resist. He couldn't. The shock froze him from the inside out. Every bump of the road to the precinct felt like it was driving the bullet deeper into his soul. When they booked him, he didn't speak. He just kept seeing Malcolm's face, the way the life had vanished in seconds. Hours later, Ava arrived, her face pale and streaked with tears. Isaiah. She whispered through the bars. They said Malcolm attacked them. Isaiah looked at her like he was staring through glass. Attacked? His voice cracked. He raised his hands. Ava swallowed hard. We'll fight this. I'll get the footage. I'll call the media. But Isaiah shook his head slowly. They'll bury it. Ava. Just like they buried Dad's case. Silence hung heavy between them. Ava pressed her hand against the bars. I won't let them. Isaiah met her eyes. The same fire. The same pain. You go after justice your way, he said softly. I'll find mine. When morning came, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. The news called it a tragic misunderstanding. CPD issued a statement praising the officer's swift response. The body cam footage? Under review? The truth? Already buried. In another part of town. Briggs sat at his kitchen table. Polishing his badge, his wife asked. Are you okay? He nodded. He made me do it, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Reynolds, meanwhile, sat alone in his car outside a bar, replaying the moment, whispering. He didn't reach. He knew he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. And Isaiah, the soldier who had survived every battlefield but this one, sat in a holding cell, blood drying on his hands, eyes staring through the steel bars into nothing. In his mind, one promise replayed over and over, don't let them get away. He whispered it out loud, a vow forming in the dark. When the cell door finally opened and Ava's voice called his name. Isaiah wasn't the same man anymore. The soldier had returned. But this time, the war wasn't overseas. It was right here, in the city he once called home, and it had just claimed his brother's life. Isaiah Carter walked out of the Chicago Police Department in silence, but his soul screamed louder than any siren in the city. The morning air felt heavy, colder than before, as if the world itself had turned its back on him. His sister Ava walked beside him, holding the release papers in one hand, her eyes red from sleeplessness. The city hummed as usual. Traffic lights, coffee shops, the rhythm of ordinary life. But for the Carters, everything ordinary had died with Malcolm, before they reached the car. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Carter, did your brother resist arrest? Was he armed? Isaiah kept walking. He didn't trust himself to speak. If he opened his mouth, grief would spill out as rage. Ava stopped one of the reporters cold with a glare. My brother was unarmed, and my twin was murdered. Write that down. The cameras clicked, the microphones retreated. Inside the car, silence returned, the kind that burns more than words ever could. At home. Isaiah sat on the couch staring at a folded flag resting on the table, the one they'd received years ago for their father's service. The irony twisted in his gut. He'd fought for a flag that couldn't protect his own family. Ava stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, arguing with someone from the department. You can't just seal the footage, she said sharply. Body cam data is public record. Don't play games with me. Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. She was like Malcolm that way, too brave for her own safety. Hours passed before she turned to Isaiah. They're stonewalling, all of them, she said quietly. The CPD's internal affairs, the district attorney, even the union. They said it's under investigation, which means it's buried. Isaiah didn't answer. He was staring at Malcolm's photo, the two of them at age 10, holding fishing rods by Lake Michigan, both smiling, both alive. He didn't even flinch. Isaiah whispered, He just raised his hands. Ava knelt beside him. We'll get them. Isaiah, legally. I'll take it all the way. But the word legally meant nothing to him anymore. He'd seen what lawful looked like, a system that let Briggs walk free while his brother's body went cold in a morgue. Ava didn't see it yet, but Isaiah knew. The courts were just another battlefield. And justice here didn't wear a uniform. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Malcolm's final moments. The shock, the breath, the whisper, "Don't let them get away." He woke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as if he were back in Afghanistan. The PTSD that had stayed quiet for years now roared alive. He stumbled to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. In the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back, eyes hollow, beard rough, a soldier without a mission. But that changed when his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, Detective Lena Brooks. The text said, "We need to talk. Not all of us believe Briggs's story. They met in an underground parking lot at midnight. Lena was one of the few black detectives still in CPD's organized crime division, sharp, weary, and disgusted by what she'd seen. "I shouldn't be here," she told him, voice low. "But your brother's case, it's not isolated. Briggs has 12 complaints, all buried by Captain Harlan." She handed him a flash drive, body cam files, unofficial. "I pulled what I could before they scrubbed it." Isaiah looked at her, unsure whether to trust her. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Lena sighed. "Because 2 years ago, Briggs slammed a teenage boy's head into a wall, a black kid, and got promoted. Because he tried to corner me once in the locker room and called it a joke. Because this city protects monsters and calls it protocol." Her eyes softened. "Your brother deserves better. So do you." When Isaiah watched the footage that night, he saw things he could never unsee. Briggs laughing after assaults, Reynolds standing silent as it happened, victims crying, reports rewritten, evidence erased. He felt something inside him shift, like a door closing for good. Ava would fight with words. He would fight with action. The next day, Ava prepared a press statement. "We'll file a federal civil rights suit," she said with fierce determination. "We'll demand the release of the footage, subpoena their records, expose their lies." Isaiah nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. On Briggs, on Reynolds, on justice that never came. He went for a walk through Southside, the neighborhood that raised him. Every corner held a memory. Malcolm teaching him to throw a football, their mother handing out sandwiches to neighbors, sirens echoing in the distance. They had grown up in poverty but with pride. "We're Carters," their father used to say. "We fight for what's right." As he passed an old mural of black soldiers, Isaiah felt his resolve harden. He would fight. But not in court. That evening, he found himself in a dimly lit bar in the Loop, the kind of place where cops gathered to drown their guilt. He wore a hooded jacket, sitting quietly at the counter, and then he heard it. Reynolds's voice, unmistakable, bragging to 2 officers at the next table. "You should have seen it." Reynolds slurred. Guy thought he was invincible. Briggs dropped him in one shot. Textbook. The others laughed. "What about his brother?" one asked. "That one's cracked," Reynolds said, chuckling, still crying over his dead twin. Isaiah froze, his hand tightening around the glass until it cracked. For a moment, he wanted to stand up, to make Reynolds feel the same terror he'd seen in Malcolm's eyes. But he didn't. He left the bar quietly, his face calm but his pulse steady and focused. That was the moment the soldier returned, when he got home. Ava was reviewing documents. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "I've been working on the complaint." Isaiah looked at her. His brilliant, hopeful sister who still believed justice came from paperwork. "You do what you have to." "Ava," he said softly. "But stay out of this for a while." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" Isaiah stepped closer, his voice calm but distant. "The law protects them. It won't protect you." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let me handle it." Ava stood, realization dawning. "No. Isaiah, don't. That's not who you are." He met her eyes, and for a brief second, she saw the soldier she thought she'd lost, disciplined, precise, and dangerously quiet, later that night, as Ava fell asleep over her papers. Isaiah opened his closet and took out an old duffel bag. Inside were remnants of his past: tactical gloves, a compact drone, night vision gear, and the Delta patch he once wore with pride. He ran his fingers over it, whispering, "For you, Malcolm." Outside, the city lights glowed indifferent, the world unaware that a war was quietly beginning again, not overseas this time, but in the heart of Chicago, and for the first time since the gunfire. Isaiah felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. The system had failed, the law had turned its back, and justice had been buried. But Isaiah Carter was done asking for permission to dig it back up. Isaiah Carter sat alone in his apartment, the city lights flickering against the walls like ghosts that wouldn't rest. For days. He'd listened to the same sound in his head, the echo of the gunshot that took his brother's life. No matter how loud the city became, that single shot cut through everything. It was the sound of betrayal, and it was now the rhythm of his pulse. He had spent his whole life serving rules, the military code, the Constitution, the oath of a soldier who believed in justice. But now, those same rules protected murderers, and Isaiah knew, deep in his bones, that justice in its current form was useless to him. Ava believed in the courts. He believed in consequence. The next morning, he cleaned his apartment with military precision, not because it mattered, but because soldiers always prepare before battle. On the table, he laid out everything he needed: an old field knife, tactical gloves, and the flash drive Lena Brooks had given him. He plugged it in and watched every file, one by one. Briggs's voice filled the room. Crude jokes, threats, and laughter captured from previous arrests. "You people never learn," Briggs said in one clip, kicking a handcuffed man in another. Reynolds's nervous chuckle followed every act of violence. The system had called it unsubstantiated complaints. Isaiah closed his laptop, breathing deeply. The rage inside him wasn't loud. It was silent and surgical. He picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in years. "Hayes," a deep voice answered. "It's Carter," Isaiah said. A pause, then a low whistle. "Damn. I thought you were done with that life." "I was," Isaiah replied. But something happened. Within hours, Jamal Hayes, his old Delta teammate, met him at a mechanic's garage on the south side. Jamal looked older, heavier around the eyes, but still carried the calm of a man who'd seen too much. "I saw the news," Jamal said quietly. "They said your brother resisted." Isaiah stared at the ground. "They always say that." "What do you need?" Jamal asked, already knowing the answer. Eyes in silence. Isaiah replied, "A drone, burner phones, and a ride that doesn't exist." Jamal studied him for a long moment. "You're not gonna kill them, are you?" Isaiah's expression didn't change. "No," he said after a pause. "I'm gonna do worse." By nightfall, Isaiah was ready. He had maps of Chicago laid out, marking every route, every pattern. Through Lena's contacts, he got Reynolds's patrol schedule. The man was predictable. Same shift, same stops, same bar after work. Isaiah studied him like a target in a mission brief. 3 days later, he moved. He parked across the Englewood lot where Reynolds always smoked after patrol. The drone hovered silently above, its camera feeding live video to Isaiah's phone. The ex-soldier watched Reynolds laugh with another cop, then limp slightly to his car. The man was careless, oblivious to the storm closing in. When the lot finally emptied, Isaiah stepped out, dark hoodie, gloves, calm breath. His boots barely made a sound as he approached. He wasn't hunting with hate. He was executing a plan. Reynolds turned, startled. "Hey, this is private," before he could finish. Isaiah's hand clamped around his neck, shoving him against the car. "Do you know who I am?" Isaiah asked. Voice low. "Steady." Reynolds gasped, panic in his eyes. "Carter, look. I didn't. Say his name." Isaiah interrupted. "What?" "Say his name," Isaiah repeated, pressing harder. "My brother." "Malcolm Carter," Reynolds stammered. He reached. Isaiah's fist crashed into his jaw, dropping him to his knees. "No!" He raised his hands. The cop tried to crawl away, but Isaiah dragged him back. The sound of his boots scraping against the pavement echoed through the empty lot. 12 complaints, Isaiah said coldly. 12 families, and you stood there for all of them. You didn't pull the trigger, but you never stopped it either. Reynolds wept, shaking. "Please, I'm sorry." Isaiah crouched beside him. "Sorry is a word men like you use when they finally feel fear." He pulled out a small taser device, not standard issue, military grade. One jolt to the spine, precise, enough to cripple without killing. "You're going to live." "Reynolds," Isaiah whispered. "You'll wake up tomorrow and remember every face you ignored." Then he pressed the trigger. Reynolds screamed as his body convulsed, then went limp, barely breathing. Isaiah stood over him, staring down with quiet contempt. "Now you know what power feels like when it's taken away." He left him there, calling an anonymous tip for an ambulance before disappearing into the night. By morning, the news spread. Chicago officer found paralyzed in mysterious attack. The department blamed gang retaliation. No one mentioned Malcolm Carter. Ava saw the report and froze. "Isaiah," she whispered. She knew the look in his eyes last time they spoke. She knew he was capable of this. She wanted justice. But not like this. Not through pain. That evening, Isaiah returned to his apartment. His hands trembled for the first time since the mission began. He told himself it was the adrenaline. But deep down, he knew it was something else. The thin line between vengeance and madness was blurring. He took a deep breath and opened his notebook. A page titled Briggs. He underlined the name twice. The man who pulled the trigger. The man who laughed while his brother bled out. "You're next," he murmured. But before Isaiah could take another step, his phone vibrated. It was Ava. Her voice shook with terror. "Isaiah." Briggs was here. His blood ran cold. "What?" "He came to the house. He knows we're looking into him. He had a gun." Isaiah was already on his feet. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, voice breaking. "He said if you don't stop, someone else will pay. He looked right at me." Isaiah grabbed his jacket, his mind clear again, sharper than ever. "Stay inside, lock the doors, don't call the cops. I'm coming." As he drove through the dark streets, his jaw clenched, every breath heavy. Reynolds had been a warning. Briggs was the real war. And Isaiah knew one thing now. This wouldn't end until one of them couldn't stand anymore. In the shadows of Chicago's highways, a soldier's promise burned brighter than the city lights. Don't let them get away. And Isaiah Carter was about to keep it. Isaiah felt the world narrow to a single. Terrible focus the moment Ava's voice trembled through the line. He came to the house. "Isaiah." He pointed the gun at me. "He knows we're after him." He didn't ask how or why. Questions were for the courtroom he no longer trusted. He hung up, every muscle coiling like a drawn wire, and drove with a calm that belonged to men who'd learned to move under fire. Lincoln Park's streets blurred past in a wet smear of sodium lights. Ava's house sat dark and small against a city that suddenly felt hostile. Isaiah slipped through the back, boots soft on the patio stones, heart measured and patient. Inside. The kitchen light was still on. A wine glass sat half full on the counter. Hands trembled on the banister where Ava had stood, and the air smelled faintly of perfume and fear. Briggs had been there. Muddy footprints on the welcome mat, a scuff on the wooden doorframe, a single coarse word carved into the margin of a magazine on the table. Ava sat on the sofa, face white but steady, clutching a copy of Malcolm's photo like a talisman. He said he'd make us stop. She whispered, "He said he'd make you stop." She met Isaiah's eyes with that fierce resolve she always wore like armor. "You asked me to stay out of it." "I didn't listen. I should have listened." Isaiah closed the distance and put his palm against her cheek for the briefest instant, feeling the tremor there. "You did what you had to," he replied. "You did the right thing." He could see the fear wound tight in her throat, but beneath it was the same stubborn love that had pulled their family through worse. When he moved again, it was not to comfort, but to prepare. The hunter in him had reawakened, senses attuned to danger and to the smallest chances. Lena's flash drive lay heavy in his pocket. Jamal's van hummed with gear outside, and a drone loitered like a silent hawk over the block. Briggs had gone too far. He had threatened a woman with a badge of authority he used like a cudgel. That alone justified the long, careful work Isaiah was about to do. He called Jamal and gave him 2 words. Now. Englewood. Then he told Ava to lock herself in the bedroom, to leave the porch light off, to breathe slowly until he came back. And she did as he asked, handing him a look that said, "If anything happens, remember he loved you." The plan was surgical. Lure Briggs where Isaiah could control the variables, force him to run on a road with nowhere to hide. Isaiah baited the trap with a rumor, a lead about a supposed witness at a diner in the Loop, and waited for Briggs to follow the itch of power and paranoia. Briggs was predictably arrogant. He couldn't resist the chance to intimidate and to prove he still ruled the streets. Isaiah watched Briggs's cruiser on the drone feed as the officer sped north, fury visible now in the hunched set of his shoulders. Reynolds rode shotgun, eyes glazed with the fatigue of a man who had been asked to do bad things too often. The highway out of the city was dark and wide, the kind of ribbon of asphalt where men in cars could pretend they owned speed. Isaiah tailed from a respectful distance, Jamal at his side in an unmarked van, a second drone above to catch any evasive moves. He didn't enjoy the chase. He did not take pleasure in the violence. Yet he understood cause and effect in the same bone-deep way he'd once calculated entries and exits for raids. Every risk had a countermeasure, every threat a limit. On the overpass, Briggs's driving went erratic. He swerved to cut another car off as if reminding himself he could punish civilians for small slights. Isaiah closed the distance. He felt the old training kick in, the split-second decision-making that decides who lives and who dies, but his intent remained the same: disable, not kill. The first impact was a controlled, textbook ram. Isaiah shoved his vehicle against Briggs' rear quarter, enough to unsettle but not to flip. Briggs fought back with a violent, instinctive lunge, trying to bring his gun to bear. Isaiah anticipated the move and used it against him, aligning the van's momentum to nudge Briggs toward the shoulder. The second strike was harder, deliberate. Metal screamed, airbags deployed in a dull, mechanized sigh, and Briggs's cruiser fishtailed toward the guardrail. Tires smoked. Time slowed in the way only moments of high consequence do, a hand reaching for a door handle, a flare of bad language, the flash of a badge. Isaiah didn't hesitate. He slammed his vehicle into the cruiser with precision that would have impressed any mission leader, then leapt clear as Briggs's car skidded and slammed into the guardrail with a final. nauseating crunch. Briggs crawled from the wreck, cursing, face split with rage and humiliation. He stumbled toward the safety of the asphalt, clutching a pistol like a talisman. Isaiah closed in without haste, the world reduced to the scent of gasoline and the hard music of his own breath. "Get on the ground," Isaiah ordered. He said it once. It landed like a verdict. Briggs looked up, eyes wild, and for the first time the man saw the soldier's face in front of him. Not a suspect, not a civilian, but a man who had survived a dozen wars and refused to be bullied in his own country. The officer raised the weapon, shaking. Isaiah didn't want to kill him. He never had. He wanted to remove the power Briggs wielded so casually. He thought of Malcolm's last words and the families whose complaints had been folded into drawers and forgotten. He also thought of Ava's face back at the house, and of Marcus, the child Briggs would later confess to having, a truth he would reveal in a moment that cracked the hard shell around his chest. Isaiah moved like a man who'd measured consequences, a single one-handed disarm, wrist locks with a precision that bent Briggs's arm in a way designed to cripple, but not to end. The gun skittered across the asphalt and came to a stop at Isaiah's boot, for a breathless second. The world allowed the two men to stare at each other without noise. Isaiah's breathing was steady, Briggs's ragged and furious. "Why?" Briggs spat, venom trembling in the syllable. Isaiah didn't answer with words. He knelt and applied a restraint that left Briggs unable to stand, a methodical undoing of the man's ability to harm another person, as he did. Briggs's face went slack and he began to babble. Between curses and pleas came a confession that buckled Isaiah's knees in ways he hadn't expected. Years ago, Briggs said, he had hidden the death of a black kid, had buried reports, had used his badge to erase guilt. And then, in a voice ragged with shame that sounded like it came from a different man entirely, Briggs said the impossible. He had a son, Marcus, a black teenager from a relationship he'd never acknowledged publicly. The admission was not a plea for mercy. It was an unveiling of the mess they'd all been complicit in. Isaiah felt the room inside his chest shift. The moral lines he'd drawn were not as clean as he'd believed. The enemy had a history, pain, and, improbably, someone else's blood on his hands. Ava's words, justice that is complicated, echoed in his mind. He could feel the city's sirens closing like teeth. The PD would be on them in minutes. Isaiah tightened the restraint and looked up toward the distant wail of approaching lights. He had come to break a system, not to become the monster it had been. Yet as Briggs's breath came ragged and the confession tumbled out, Isaiah understood the complexity of punishment, the way one life's ruin could be another's salvation, the tangled legacy of fathers and sons, of power and secrecy. He had made Malcolm's last wish his mission, but now the mission had weight beyond revenge. The highway smelled of smoke, the guardrail glinted cold, and the distant sirens drew nearer. Isaiah slipped a glance at Briggs's terrified face, then toward the skyline where Ava waited. And he realized the war had entered a new phase, one where the consequences would touch more than just those who pulled triggers. The sirens echoed like a countdown, but Isaiah didn't run. He stood on the shoulder of the suburban highway, wind howling through shattered glass, staring at the man who had murdered his twin brother. Daniel Briggs lay sprawled beside the wrecked cruiser, leg twisted, blood streaking his face, his badge gleaming faintly under the red pulse of Isaiah's drone lights above. The night smelled of gasoline, burnt rubber, and something raw. Justice, stripped of its disguise. Isaiah's breath came slow, almost calm, but inside. Every nerve screamed. He had spent his life controlling chaos, calculating distance, impact, and consequence. But this moment, this exact moment, was beyond calculation. He crouched down, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the sound of approaching sirens. You looked my brother in the eye when you killed him. You remember that? Briggs groaned, coughing, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. He reached for something. Isaiah leaned closer, his face just inches away. Say it again. Briggs swallowed hard, breath trembling. He reached. Isaiah struck him once, open-handed across the face, not with rage but precision, the kind of strike soldiers use to keep someone conscious. No, he didn't. Isaiah said softly. He raised his hands. Briggs spat blood, but his tone turned defiant. You think this changes anything? You think anyone's going to believe a fugitive over me? Isaiah's eyes flickered with a cold fire. No, he said. But they'll believe what's left of you. He pulled out a compact tactical device, the same kind used in Delta operations to disable prisoners without killing them. It looked like a small taser, but the voltage was calibrated, a weapon that could destroy movement from the waist down. He pressed it to Briggs's spine, just above the belt. Briggs's eyes widened. You're not going to kill me? Isaiah's voice was steady. No, you're going to live with what you did. You'll live the rest of your life unable to run from it. The device hissed. Electricity surged through Briggs' body, arching his back, seizing his limbs, and then releasing him into silence. His breathing came ragged. He tried to move, but nothing below his waist responded. Isaiah knelt beside him again, voice low and deliberate. You'll never wear that badge again. You'll never hurt anyone's brother again. That's your sentence. For a moment. Neither man spoke. The sirens drew closer, red lights strobing in the distance. Then Briggs, through clenched teeth, whispered something Isaiah didn't expect. I had a son once. Isaiah froze, unsure if this was another lie. Briggs coughed, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Marcus, he said, 17. His mother was black. I never told anyone. Couldn't. My father was CPD too. He'd have killed me first. Isaiah felt something shift in his chest. Not sympathy, but clarity. The hatred he carried had a human face now, tangled with guilt and hypocrisy. Does he know about you? Isaiah asked. Briggs laughed bitterly. He knows what I am. He told me once. You hate the same blood that made me. He was right. He coughed again, weaker now. So go ahead. Soldier, finish it. Isaiah looked down at him, and for a fleeting moment, he saw not a monster, but a man hollowed out by his own hate. No, Isaiah said finally. I'm done killing ghosts. He picked up Briggs' badge, still glinting faintly in the night, and dropped it on the ground beside him. You don't get to die as a cop. You live as what you are. A coward. The first police sirens flared around the curve, tires screeching. Isaiah vanished into the tree line before the cruisers arrived, by the time the officers reached the scene. Briggs was barely conscious, paralyzed from the waist down, gun lost, vehicle totaled. He told them a vague story, an ambush, masked men, maybe a gang, but everyone in CPD knew better. The whispers started before sunrise. Someone's taking them out. One officer said, first Reynolds, now Briggs. But no one said Isaiah's name aloud. The department had too many ghosts of its own. Back in the shadows of the city. Isaiah retreated to Jamal's safe house, a garage on the outskirts of Springfield. Jamal stood at the doorway, arms folded. You did it, didn't you? He asked quietly. Isaiah didn't answer. He sat on an old bench, rubbing his hands together as if trying to remove something invisible. He's alive. Isaiah finally said, That's enough. Jamal exhaled, relief and dread mixing in equal measure. Then it's not over, he said. They'll come for you. Isaiah nodded. Let them. In the days that followed, news spread like wildfire. Officer Daniel Briggs hospitalized after attack, permanently paralyzed. The footage leaked, not from the police, but from someone inside, Lena Brooks. She uploaded the truth piece by piece, Briggs' body cam records, internal complaints, falsified reports. Within 48 hours, the city turned. Protests filled downtown Chicago, banners with Malcolm Carter's face waved in the air, and chants echoed through the streets. Say his name, Malcolm Carter. Ava stood on the courthouse steps, speaking before cameras. The men who killed my brother hid behind their badges. Now the truth is out. The system that protected them must answer for it. She never mentioned Isaiah. She didn't have to. Every reporter in the city knew there was someone out there. A shadow. A hand of justice working where the law had failed. Meanwhile, Briggs' life unraveled. Lawsuits piled against him. 12 families. All victims he'd silenced. His pension frozen. His reputation destroyed. His wife leaving quietly with their son. He spent his days confined to a hospital bed, surrounded by machines and memories. Reynolds, too, was in a different kind of prison, addicted to painkillers, broke, haunted by guilt. He would later confess to his role in a recorded podcast, his voice shaking. But by then, the public had already turned away. Isaiah watched it all from a distance, never taking credit, never stepping into the light. He wasn't proud, he wasn't even satisfied. He had avenged Malcolm, but at a cost that could never be repaid. One evening, as he sat alone in the garage, Ava's voice came through on a burner phone. "They've cleared you as a suspect," she said softly. "They don't have proof." Isaiah chuckled dryly. "Proof isn't what they need. It's a name to blame." "Then disappear," Ava urged. "Please, before they find one." Isaiah hesitated, then looked at the old photo of the three of them, Malcolm, Ava, and himself, smiling before deployment, full of hope. "I'll go," he said, "but don't think this is over. The system still breathes." Before dawn, he packed light, a bag, a few clothes, and Malcolm's old dog tag. Jamal hugged him once. "You're a ghost now, brother," he said. "Don't let them find you." Isaiah nodded. They already did. They just don't know it yet. He drove south toward Springfield, the drone footage of the highway fading behind him, the weight of vengeance lifting but never leaving entirely, for the first time in months. He saw the sunrise and didn't think of blood, but deep inside, he knew this peace wasn't freedom. It was exile, behind him. Chicago burned with outrage and reform. Ahead, the road stretched quiet and endless. And for Isaiah Carter, soldier, brother, avenger. The war was finally over, but the scars would follow him wherever he went. 18 months after the night on the highway, Chicago had changed, but Isaiah Carter had disappeared. His name lingered in whispers, painted in graffiti on underpasses, murmured in protest chants, and invoked in sermons about justice. The man himself was gone, a ghost, somewhere beyond the city that had taken his brother and broken his faith. Springfield, Illinois, became his refuge, a town far from the chaos, where no one asked questions and no one cared about the man fixing their engines. In a corner of a modest auto shop, Isaiah worked quietly, sleeves rolled, grease under his fingernails, head down. His eyes, once sharp with the precision of a soldier, were softer now, tired, watchful, always scanning the horizon. He lived in the shadow of what he'd done. 2 officers broken, 1 city awakened, but peace never came. Every night, he woke before dawn drenched in sweat, hearing the same words Malcolm had whispered on that cold Chicago street. "Don't let them get away." Sometimes, he'd sit outside with a cup of black coffee, staring into the darkness until the world lightened, reminding himself he was still here, still breathing, still accountable. Social media had turned the Carter case into a symbol. The footage Lena Brooks leaked had sparked outrage, leading to new oversight policies and forced retirements across the Chicago Police Department. But reform came slowly. painfully. For every victory, Ava won in court. Isaiah felt the cost like a bruise. The city might have healed, but he couldn't. His sister became the public face of justice. Sharp suits, measured words, interviews on national television. We're not anti-police, she'd tell the cameras. We're anti-abuse, yet, in private calls from an encrypted number, she spoke to him differently. You did what the system wouldn't, she'd whisper. But you can't keep running forever. He didn't respond to that. Running wasn't the right word. He wasn't fleeing. He was hiding from the version of himself he'd become. One rainy afternoon, as thunder cracked over the flat Illinois sky, a familiar voice came through the static of his burner phone. They're watching again. Jamal said, CPD's reopened internal files. They're trying to find you. Isaiah didn't even look up from the engine he was rebuilding. They won't, he replied quietly. They will. Jamal said, they have a new task force. Federal now. Briggs is talking again. Says he saw your face before he blacked out. Isaiah finally paused, tightening a bolt with deliberate slowness. He saw a lot that night. He said, doesn't mean anyone believes him? There was silence on the line. Then Jamal's voice softened. You can't stay buried forever. Brother, you've done enough damage. And enough good. Time to choose which one defines you. Isaiah didn't answer. He hung up, pocketed the phone, and stepped out into the rain. The water streaked down his face like it was trying to wash something away, but it couldn't reach what was inside. Days later, he received a letter from Ava, handwritten, sealed without a return address. Inside were 2 photos, one of Malcolm's grave, the headstone cleaned and freshly painted, and one of Ava herself standing beside it, holding a candle. On the back, she'd written, we won. The Civil Rights Division just forced a full policy overhaul, body cam uploads, automatic civilian review boards, independent oversight. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Malcolm's name is in the law now. Isaiah read it twice, then folded it neatly. The ache in his chest was sharp. But for the first time, it wasn't hollow. He'd done what he promised. Justice, imperfect, flawed, and human, had come. But the cost was exile. He couldn't return to Chicago, not as Isaiah Carter. That man was gone, buried alongside his twin. Still, the world had a cruel way of finding him. A week later, he spotted a man in a gray sedan parked across from the shop. Same car every day, same man pretending to read the newspaper. Federal. Isaiah recognized the posture. He'd been trained to do the same. He didn't panic. Instead, he waited. The following morning, he left a note on the sedan's windshield. If you're looking for justice, you're parked in the wrong town. The car didn't come back after that, at night. Isaiah helped the shop owner's teenage son with his homework. The boy, 15 and curious, often asked questions Isaiah couldn't answer. You ever been in the army? The boy asked one evening. Isaiah smiled faintly. Something like that. The boy nodded. My uncle was killed by police 2 years ago, he said quietly. I want to be a lawyer like Ava Carter. She's on TV all the time. Isaiah's hand froze mid-turn of a wrench. Yeah, he said softly. She's a good one. Every word the kid spoke felt like Malcolm's echo, the next generation carrying the torch he could no longer bear. But peace didn't last. One evening, Lena Brooks called from an unknown number, her voice shaking. Isaiah. Briggs tried to file a suit against the city. She said, claims police failed to protect him from vigilantes. They'll use that to drag your name out again. Isaiah sighed. Let them. They'll never prove anything. They don't need proof, Lena warned. They need a headline. That night, Isaiah sat in his small apartment staring at the single photo on his wall. Him, Malcolm, and Ava, smiling in front of their childhood home. He spoke quietly into the silence. "You said not to let them get away," he whispered. "I didn't. But what now? Brother?" No answer came, only the faint rattle of rain against the glass. He realized something painful. Vengeance had filled the space justice left empty. But it couldn't heal what was broken. Malcolm was still gone. The family they once were could never be again. All he could do now was protect what remained. A week later. Ava called again, her voice softer than before. "They're holding a memorial for Malcolm next month. You should come." "I can't," Isaiah said quietly. "You can," she insisted. "It's private. No cameras, just family." He hesitated, then asked, "You still believe in me?" "Always." She said, "You kept your promise." He didn't cry, though his chest tightened as he listened to her voice fade into static. The next morning, he packed his few belongings into an old duffel bag, the same one he'd carried through war zones, and left Springfield before sunrise. He didn't know where the road would take him, only that it would end where it began. Chicago. As the miles rolled by beneath him, he felt something loosen, not forgiveness, but a fragile kind of peace. He had lived as a soldier, a brother, a fugitive, and now, perhaps, a man learning how to exist again. The ghosts would always follow, but for the first time. He wasn't running from them. He was walking beside them, and as the city skyline rose in the distance, Isaiah Carter whispered to the empty seat beside him, "We did it. Malcolm." They finally listened. The cemetery was quiet that morning, blanketed in a thin mist that curled through the headstones like breath from the dead. Isaiah stood before his twin brother's grave, hands deep in his coat pockets, the cold biting through the silence. The stone was clean, freshly polished, with simple words carved into it. Malcolm Carter, son, brother, soldier, beloved, beneath it. Ava had added a line from Malcolm's favorite quote, "Justice is not revenge, it's remembrance." Isaiah read it over and over, the words cutting deeper each time. He had spent 18 months trying to balance those two things, never quite sure which one he'd been serving. He heard footsteps behind him before he saw her. Ava's voice came softly. "You came." He turned, and there she was, wrapped in a long gray coat, eyes tired but peaceful. "You didn't think I would?" he asked, managing a faint smile. She stepped beside him, looking down at the grave. "I wasn't sure." She said, "After everything, I thought maybe you'd stay gone." He shook his head. "I tried," he admitted. "But some promises don't let you disappear." For a while, they just stood there in silence. The city hummed faintly in the distance. Life continuing, indifferent yet changed. Ava finally spoke. "The investigation's over," she said. "The Civil Rights Division closed it last month. CPD's new oversight board is in place. They're calling it the Malcolm Carter policy." She smiled. Bittersweet. Every officer involved shooting now triggers automatic federal review. They can't hide it anymore. Isaiah nodded, eyes still on the grave. "You did it," he said quietly. Ava looked at him. "No," she said. "We did." He wanted to believe that, but deep down, he knew his path hadn't been about policy or politics. His had been personal, raw, human, and irreversible, Reynolds confessed. Ava continued. "He went on a podcast last month, said your name, said he lied, he's broke, addicted, and half the city hates him. But," she hesitated, "he said he was sorry." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Sorry doesn't bring Malcolm back." "No," Ava agreed, "but it keeps the truth alive." Then, her voice softened. "Briggs is in a nursing home outside Joliet. Can't walk, barely speaks. His wife divorced him. His pension's gone. And get this." She reached into her coat and handed Isaiah a folded letter. This came to my office 3 weeks ago. Isaiah unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but clear. It was from Marcus, Briggs's estranged son, Mr. Carter. It began, "You don't know me, but I know what my father did to your family. I've spent my life hating the man who raised me. But lately, I've realized hate doesn't build anything. I want to be part of fixing what he broke. I've joined a community program in South Side, the one named after your brother. I hope someday you'll meet me not as the son of the man who hurt you, but as someone trying to make things right." Isaiah read it twice, then folded it back, staring out toward the horizon, a son trying to clean up his father's mess. He murmured, "Funny how life circles back." Ava smiled faintly. Maybe that's what Malcolm wanted, for all this pain to mean something. They stood quietly as the sun began to push through the fog, the light falling softly over Malcolm's grave. Isaiah knelt, brushing a bit of dirt from the headstone, his voice low and steady. "You were right, brother. They didn't get away. Not this time." Ava's phone buzzed. She ignored it. "You know," she said gently, "people still ask about you. The press thinks you're dead, the department thinks you fled the country, and activists call you a legend." She smiled at him with pride and sadness all at once. "But to me, you're just my brother, stubborn, broken, and somehow still standing." Isaiah chuckled softly. "Guess that makes two of us." He looked around at the quiet graves, at the rows of names carved in stone. "We lose so many before anyone listens," he said, "but you made them listen. Ava, you gave him back his name." Ava blinked away tears. "No," she whispered, "you gave him back his voice." They embraced, a long, silent moment that carried all the years of grief, rage, and love between them, for the first time since that night. Isaiah felt something like peace, fragile but real. He knew he couldn't stay. His face was still on too many lists, his past still a weight he couldn't lay down, but he could leave knowing the world had shifted, even just a little. "I can't come home," he said softly. "Not yet. I know." Ava said, "But wherever you go, you're not alone." He gave a quiet nod. "Tell the world Malcolm was the better half." "He already is," she said, when he finally turned to leave. The mist had lifted. The sky stretched wide and blue, the kind of morning Malcolm used to call a clean start. As Isaiah walked toward his truck parked by the gate, he noticed a young man waiting there, early 20s, mixed race, nervous. The stranger straightened when Isaiah approached. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. Isaiah studied him. Brown skin, determined eyes, the faint resemblance of someone he recognized from the letter. "Marcus?" The young man nodded. "I wanted to meet you. To say thank you." Isaiah frowned slightly. "For what?" "For not killing him," Marcus said quietly. "If you had, I wouldn't have had the chance to tell him I forgave him before he forgot my name." For a long moment, Isaiah said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "You did what I couldn't," he said. Marcus smiled faintly. "You gave me the chance to—" He reached out a hand. Isaiah hesitated, then took it. It was a firm, steady handshake, the kind that carried history, pain, and redemption all at once. When Marcus walked away, Isaiah stood by the gate a little longer, watching the wind move through the trees. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice, Malcolm's voice, seemed to whisper, "It's done. Brother, let go." He took one last look at the grave, at Ava standing beside it, the morning sun catching her hair, and for the first time in 2 years. Isaiah smiled without bitterness. He climbed into the truck, the engine growling to life, and pulled onto the long road out of Chicago. The radio played softly, an old gospel tune their mother used to hum on Sundays. As the city faded in the rearview mirror, Isaiah whispered, "Rest easy. Malcolm, the world knows your name now." The wind rushed through the open window, carrying away the last traces of vengeance, leaving only memory. And in that memory, a kind of peace that no war, no system, and no hatred could ever destroy. And as the sun climbed higher over Illinois, the story of two brothers, one fallen, one redeemed, became legend, not because of how it ended, but because of what it began. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of justice, love and truth still find a way to echo. Thank you for watching and for standing with justice. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive, because justice only lives when we remember.